This is Dan Jurgens, and if you want to have a good time, keep listening to the Krypton Report.
Jason J. Lewis, the voice of Superman on Justice League Action, and you're listening to the Krypton Report.
Hi, this is David Patrick Wilson. I played Superman, Clark Kent, in the television production of It's a Bird, It's a Plane, enjoying every minute of being right here on the Krypton Report.
Look up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane.
The Year of Superman. Welcome to the Krypton Report podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, the Superman of Blue, the Man of Tomorrow. And with me, as always, the Superman of Red, the Man of Steel, the man whose beard knows no bounds. It's James Cole. What's up, man?
Hey, what's going on? I trimmed it, though. I had to clean it up a little bit.
He's like, I trimmed it. So, yeah, it's now March. We're kicking off this month. I'm wearing my most classic Superman shirt today. Let's get into some news. Have a little bit of news here.
Nice. I'm also wearing a vintage.
Oh yeah. I have found the Old Spice Superman shampoo. I found it.
It's about time, Tyler.
So my collection is complete. I've already started using. I bought both deodorants. I still haven't bought the spray deodorant just because it's not really my thing. Spray deodorants. So I yeah.
I have to check it out. I have to find something. Probably not the whole line, but something.
So I mean, it's just shampoo. Nice. It's just deodorant. It's 3 deodorants. One's regular deodorant, antiperspirant. One's a deodorant, and one is what do you call it?
What, a body wash or something?
Aluminum free. So it's shampoo, body wash, and then spray deodorant, regular stick deodorant, and aluminum free deodorant. So it's like 3 deodorants, right. Body wash, and shampoo.
Gotcha.
So that is the line. So but all right, so that's enough about that. But so this is a funny meme that I share with Jania because I love this. I bet he's thinking of other woman meme, and he says, I still can't wait for Superman July 11th, 2025.
Right.
Like I sent that to Jania because I was like, that's so accurate. Like, what are you thinking about, Superman? Tyler, you need help. I know. Another super announcement. James, check this. Original Supergirl Helen Slater will be at Cincinnati Comic-Con, or Comic Expo, in October.
That's exciting.
So that's 2 super people that will be there that I have yet to meet. So that's exciting. Now, I shared this with you guys the other day when I was at the store searching for my Old Spice things I never thought I'd say out loud. Old Spice shampoo. I said, I really hope that we get a Superman cereal. And I shared this image I made. It's the Man of Steel Superman cereal, and they did the caramel crunch. This is actually really good. And I just slapped the new logo on it. Just re-release it like this. I don't care.
Right. Same cereal, doesn't matter.
Yeah, same cereal. Of course, like they'll probably do like, a different, thing. And like Target last year had or 2 years ago had cinnamon lightning bolts for the Flash and like something berry for Superman. It was like Captain Crunch is what it was. And they were okay. But I liked this cereal, and I would welcome a good Superman cereal back. And I hope that we get stuff like that again. Like it makes you feel good to be a kid. Okay. Like I said, the caramel crunch actually was a pretty good cereal. So
no matter if you're a 40-year-old kid or a 4-year-old kid.
Exactly. That is a slogan right there, man. It's like ripping off the old Toys R Us logo that doesn't really matter because, Toys R Us isn't around anymore. Like, there's a million toys at Toys R Us, from bikes to chains to video games. Biggest toy store there is. Yeah. But Yeah, anyways, we got some sneak peeks for some McFarlane's. Check this. A Superwoman of Tomorrow figure. That's one I wouldn't mind having because I really don't have any good Supergirl McFarlane figures. The only one I've wanted that they've released is from Injustice.
Right. I'm pretty sure I have the Mattel Supergirl figure, the
Well, see,
Melissa Benoist.
I have the Mattel. I'm talking about some McFarlane. I have the Melissa. I have the DK. So there was the Mattel, and then there was like the DC Direct one, and I think I have the Mattel.
Yeah.
So we have a sneak peek of the Godzilla with the small Superman figure. That's supposed to be more like the accurate size, and then a large Superman figure. But for some reason, my image of the larger Superman figure is not wanting to load what it looks like, but it's pretty. And there's another McFarlane Superman coming that looks just like comics. Maybe I can pull this up. Hold on. Let me see if I can get this to work. It's just kind of like I don't know. I get tired. I feel like they're just selling us the same figure, and maybe that's part of why they're going to lose the licensing or something, because they're not really doing a lot of things that they could be with some of these figures. Like, how many times have people begged for Blue Lantern or Kingdom Come Superman? You know, like, we're not getting some of the figures that we want. So what do you think? Like, we're just getting, because some of them just feel like they just take the different Superman figures, they put them, you know, like, oh, I'm gonna grab the face sculpt from this, the body sculpt from this, and then
just mix and match pieces.
Yeah, and then like paint it this little bit different shade of blue, and boom, there we go.
Yeah. I mean, like, at the very least, if they did like a an Ed McGuinness Superman, like a different, you know, because Ed McGuinness Superman is a specific design,
and it makes complete sense.
They could do an artist line, you know, Ed McGuinness characters, freaking across the board.
They haven't done, like, I don't know why they didn't do a. What would have been neat is to do a whole Batman Noel line. You have Batman, Superman, the Joker, was it Catwoman
and Robin,
and yeah, like ghostly Robin, and you know what I'm saying? Like, how cool would that have been? Because I have the Batman Noel figure, which is really neat. But how cool would it have been if we would have gotten like a full-on demonstration? So
right. What would because we got the, was it the DC Direct, the comic design series, the Libre Mejo? Like, what would a McFarlane one look like? Would it be as detailed or more detailed or less or what?
So it's just one of those things. I don't know. It pisses me off. Okay. So we're getting a Black Label Peacemaker presents Vigilante and Eagly 5-issue run.
Yeah.
And I guess this is going to be, it's going to tie into the show somehow. I don't know if it's before Peacemaker season 2 or after Peacemaker season 2. So I'm looking forward to reading it.
I'm going to check it out. You know, I always like checking out the movie tie-ins. Unfortunately, most movie tie-ins don't seem to be the same tone or
there's always something
seem like they seem like they are in the same world, but we'll see. I usually check most of them out.
Mm-hmm. So I was thinking about this. Here's me and our buddy Levi were talking. I'm gonna run this by you, bro. Why did we not get any McFarlane figures for Creature Commandos?
I mean, he did horror figures back in the day too. I don't know why, like movie monsters and stuff. I don't know why he.
I'm just thinking if we're
Why
launching this
they wouldn't do that?
if we're launching this big DC universe, and I mean they were pushing hard on the on merchandise for Creature Commandos. They had the pop figures coming out. Why didn't we get a McFarlane line? Because you could have done something neat. Okay, let's think about it. We have Rick Flag. Okay. Weasel. The Bride, which I would have bought.
Yep. I mean, they could have all had a Frankenstein Build-A-Fig piece in.
Well, that's what I was gonna say.
Make
I'm
a large Frankenstein.
Then, what's her face? Why Nina, and then
Nina Mazursky.
GI Robot, and then Frankenstein is your Build-A-Figure. Did I get everybody, or am I missing somebody? I feel like am I missing somebody? Anyways, yeah, I mean 4 figures, and then Frank is your Build-A-Figure. So, I mean, I just feel like you're pushing everything else, like, and then, but, we got, this is pretty neat, comics related, like different comics that I'll recreate, Action Comics, like a nod to Action Comics 1. I just thought that's cool because I'm rereading a certain book right now for our next Genea reviews.
Ooh, interesting.
So I told her, like, I thought she'd like the next one. If you haven't checked out, okay, our last episode, if you're a YouTuber, the Genea Reviews All-Star Superman is separate. It's a separate video you'll find on our YouTube. If you're just listening to the audio, you would have heard it. But just so you are aware. Oh, excuse me. We got this release. This, boom, a new picture of Superman's boots. And I don't know.
How exciting.
I don't know. The more I look at these boots, I like them more and more. Yeah, they look a little rubbery and stuff, but I think they're just the right height. They look like boots compared to being like too small, thin. We all know that I have a weird thing about boots because we talked about that when we did our Build a Costume episodes. And we talked about all the different boots that Tyler had
right.
through.
Right. Well, I mean, I wear minimalist shoes, barefoot shoes. So, the design, the style would be. I mean, I like these boots, though. So I think they look pretty good.
I just feel like boots is the hardest thing on the Superman suit to get right. Because a lot of times either they're too bright or red, they don't fit the color tone of the rest of the material, or they look too bulky. I don't know. I just feel like boots is always the hardest thing to get on the suit. So
I certainly think that people have over designed the boots in the past. That's for damn sure.
True. You speaketh the truth. Something just random here. I put this online the other day. I really think James Gunn should bring back, retool it, but like I started rewatching Powerless. The 2017 show that everyone forgot existed. That was, DC's first comedy that has an amazing cast of people in it who have done other DC properties. And so I started watching it again, and sadly it's not streaming anywhere. It's also the last thing that the late great Adam West ever made before passing away. In like the last episode, which I don't remember if that episode aired or not, or if it was just available once it became released on home media.
Yeah, I can't remember. I know that they said that I do recall people that something wasn't aired from the first season, from that season of the show. I heard maybe up to 3 episodes or something, but I bought the first season. I have that. So it's pretty funny. It's interesting.
Yeah. And I think with James Gunn's guidance and style and everything, I think that could be something really exciting to bring back. It's just something because I feel like the tone of that would work more in a tone that he's creating, and and that's why I said retool it so it's not a 1-to-1. But I think the idea of seeing people who work for like an insurance company in the world of these heroes would be fun. I feel like the show goes on to be more of camp style than actual seriousness at the time. I don't like that they do a character Superman's cousin Van Wayne because that doesn't make any sense. If it had been
Batman's cousin, Bruce Wayne's cousin.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, I think you said Superman's cousin.
Yeah, I did. But if it had been like Van Kane or something, that would have made more sense.
Yeah.
Or not even have a relation at all. So I don't like when they do that. That doesn't really make sense of who people are in their, familial connections. But I liked, there's a lot there that can mine. So I'm just saying, check it out, people. That's my quick plug for a show that's been off the air for, almost 8 years.
If you find it cheap, somewhere sometime, buy the season. It's worth a watch. It's really funny.
Yeah, like
it's
Solomon.
A good sitcom.
Yeah, and I think that's what we need. Solomon, you could definitely retool it to make it fun that it ties in the whole DC universe. Solomon watched the first episode with me and he enjoyed it, so we're gonna watch the series together. Last is it's March. And you know what that means? March Madness. And I'm not talking about basketball, okay? This is our bracket for the Super Showdown, where I made a bracket battle, and we are going to have an episode at the end of the month. I share this on social media. You can fill out your own bracket, email it to us. We'll include your information in the tallies, and you fill out who you think is going to win. And we are going to argue the Superman super character, I guess you could say, Victor. We did this with the Batman Battle Beatdown, and this is the Super Showdown of Steel. And that will be recorded towards the end of the month as a special here on YouTube. So that's all I got for news. Stay tuned for Ask James Deep Thoughts with James Cole. And we're done. That was James's deep thought. Silence is golden.
Yep. Silence is golden.
What does it mean to be quiet? But as we prepare for Superman 2025, we're looking back. And this episode is dedicating to the Era of Reeve. And we're looking at the Chris Reeve era. So we're going to start. And we've talked about this a lot, but we're kind of, talking about just everything Chris for Superman. Some say the definitive Superman, and I think he did an amazing job. I'm not going to go against that, but he's not everything that I want in a Superman. And I think that deals a lot with time, culture, growth as a person, and everything. But he, of course,
growth as a character. He, of
course, starred in Superman 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a poster of him in Supergirl. He was supposed to be in Supergirl, but that didn't work out. He digitally appeared in The Flash. And so let's discuss.
He played Virgil Swan in Smallville.
Yes. So let's talk Christopher Reeve. All right. Some people will always say their favorite, the best Superman. And that's fine. I'm not gonna argue it. But
no,
Superman the
never.
movie. Superman the movie. Let's start there. Okay. With Superman the movie, I really do love that movie. But there is a point, and I hate saying this. After Superman's first night where he comes out, we see Superman doing everything. I feel like that's part of where the movie starts to lack a little bit for me. More when we get into Lex Luthor and his plot. I feel like that's where the movie lacks some for me. I always liked the Smallville stuff at the beginning. You know, I was always enjoyed that.
Well, I mean, it takes you over an hour to get to Superman.
That's fine. I mean, when you're purposely telling a story and you're spacing things out, it's okay to take your time.
Oh yeah, they take their time. They let it breathe. I'm not saying like that was. It's not something that people would want to see today. You know, that's a complaint when any of these origin stories take you the majority of the movie to get to who the character is. You know, that's kind of why they do like the Batman Begins style of storytelling, where they start showing you who the character is present day and then go back and show you stuff. You know what I mean? So you're not waiting forever to see it. So it was very well done, and they sufficiently built up the character.
Okay. There's things what's interesting, and this is why we talk about how important it is to do a pure form of a character on film, because no matter what the comics are, no matter what the quote unquote real version of the character is, whatever is captured on film will go down as what people know, reference, and think of as the character and their story. Okay. It does not matter if, oh, that's not how they do it. That's just something they invented for. It doesn't matter. That's what people will identify with. And I'm saying all of this because in Superman the movie, this is the first time that we get Jonathan Kent dying while Clark is young. You know,
when he's in high school.
And it kills me because I heard Michael Rosenbaum giving like a whole conversation. It was him and Tom. And it's like, oh yeah, there's evidence for, Jonathan Kent dying in the comics. And I'm like, no, there's not. There's not. Because you have both parents are dead. Then you get into both parents are dead. And then you get into they're both alive, but then you have them both alive during Superboy. But it wasn't till Superman the movie that we got this idea that Jonathan Kent dies of a heart attack. And I don't know whose idea it was. I could probably go find it. Based on we know we had Mario Puzo, we had the husband and wife team, the Newmans, that wrote a treatment, and then of course Tom Mankiewicz came in and fixed everything for Richard Donner, and of course Donner's input for the script. So we don't exactly know who it was, but I can see that being someone's idea of a catalyst to help move a hero's journey along. Okay. But since this film, boom, Jonathan's got to die. We go post-crisis.
At least in like a live action sense.
Well,
like
in the comics,
Jonathan's got to die.
Well, the comics, they had Jonathan die, during like the death of Superman and everything. But they were both.
Well, he was already Superman at that time.
Exactly. And then Jonathan, which is fine, later on in his career kind of thing. I wouldn't have been surprised if Lois and Clark would have got season 4 if they would have done a Death of Jonathan Kent story. Or I mean a season 5, not because they ended after 4 seasons. Smallville killed him off at the 100th episode. Why? Because they had to. That's the story. No, it's not. Nope. I mean, we joked about how we watched the pilot for The Adventures of Superman with George Reeves and the first Kirk Allen, and it's like, oh, we found a baby. Then there's a scene after his foster parents died. Clark Kent moved to Metropolis. Like, it's just like they're both dead.
Right. Boom.
He's out of here. So yeah. But that established in everybody's mind that Jonathan has to die. So think about that. We kill Jonathan in Smallville. We kill him in Superman and Lois. We kill him by a tornado in Man of Steel. Why? Because everybody thinks that Jonathan has to die. That's why I really hope that James Gunn keeps them both alive. That's one of the biggest things that's awesome about Superboy, the TV series, and Lois and Clark, to be honest.
Yeah. And the first half of Smallville, having them both there.
But I mean, see, he dies in the series. The other series, they were canceled before he was dead. So
yeah.
But it's just nice to have that. All right. So that's something massive about that film that has put a staple on the character.
Right. Well, because current day comics, they're both alive, mom and pa, and they have their grandchild and all of the extra members of the family.
Oh yeah, I like the Kents being alive. Okay, that's just. I think Superman doesn't need that, and I also like the idea of the Kents almost being parents to the whole super community. Because what was it, Philip Kennedy Johnson's run we talked about, where you have the conversation between Alfred and, or not Alfred, sorry, Jonathan talks about his conversations with Alfred.
Yeah.
And everything, and how he misses talking with Alfred. And I'm like, that's some good stuff right there. So, but yeah, moving on. The other big thing that this, and I didn't know this till much later, that this is the first time that Smallville's in Kansas. Do you know that?
And that's the first time?
Yeah. Smallville was not in Kansas until this movie. And
I vaguely remember hearing that before, but no, that's not something that I would just get out and like as a trivia question that I'd get right. You know what I mean?
Exactly. You wouldn't think about it. But yeah, they established Smallville in Kansas. And it was kind of like Metropolis was up near New York and Smallville was like upstate New York. But for some reason, they placed it in Kansas. And where has Smallville been ever since this movie, James?
Kansas. Exactly.
So once again, the power of the image and the character on film. That's why I don't say I have a problem with, but that's why like certain things about like the DCEU was because you're doing a take and you're thinking of it as a fan, but people will look at this as definitive for those who don't read the comics. And that's always something we have to take in consideration. But we have, this is his Jesus Years movie, right? Excuse me. I just had to point out those because those really put a staple. And I think it's the first time on film, really, truly, we start to have some sort of relationship between Clark Kent and Lois Lane. But what are just some thoughts or discussions, James, just on Superman, the movie? I mean, we've talked about it before, but this is just kind of a general conversation with this era of the character.
I mean, I grew up on Superman, the movie. Chris Reeve was always, he was like the big Superman that I knew growing up, it was always Chris Reeve. And then of course we had, Dean Cain come down the line, and then Tom Welling stepping into that pseudo Superman role throughout Smallville. Even though he was always just Clark Kent, he was still doing the Superman thing and saving the day. So, but even through all of that, it was always, and then Brandon Routh came in and he was just playing Chris Reeve, trying to pick up where that version left off. This movie is, would I prefer to probably put on 2 than this one most times? Yeah. But, you just can't deny how great it is to watch that movie, watching the whole thing from beginning, all that stuff on Krypton. And then you watch any of the special features, the behind the scenes, the miniature sets, the lights, the cameras. I mean, it's so great watching old movies like that get made.
It is. And I think, part of it is because you see all the different things they had to do to make it work, to really make it work, compared to now you're just like, oh, it's all a computer.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they had to make it work. And
there's still a lot of artistry to the computer stuff, but there's just a different approach.
Yeah. Fantastic job, especially out of Chris Reeve. Everybody points to the scene at Lois's apartment where he takes off his glasses and changes his posture, and then he goes right back into it. He did a great job. He was, he is without a doubt one of the best Superman. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And he is the definition of iconic, and no one's taking that away from him. I think the issue that we have now, okay, is think about just within the past, we'll look at Solomon, okay, 10 years. He's got Henry Cavill for 2 films, technically 3. He's got Tyler on TV. And he got Brandon Routh's appearance on Crisis, and now we're getting on James Gunn. So that's 4 Supermen in a 10 years period. None of them really got the time to breathe. Well, I don't say none of them. I take that back because, David is about to, take over and everything, but he, Henry was there and Tyler was there and he watched it, but poor Tyler got shuffled to being on TV in a saturated market on a station that didn't really care, and he did an amazing job and to me became iconic as well, but he won't be general populace iconic as like Dean Cain was in the 90s, where everyone's like, oh, that's Superman. So it's tough, but because of, and Brandon never really had a chance. And so
yeah,
Chris
that was
really,
sad for him.
Chris reigns as the icon. And there's like Miss Tessmacher. That's and Otis both appear in this film and became quote unquote staples of Lex's people,
Right. There's so many versions of Otis and Miss Tessmacher.
Right.
Just throughout the years.
And I personally, okay, I love that in Supergirl, Otis was Otis Graves as Mercy's brother. I thought that was genius. So subtle, but genius.
Yeah.
But because of this movie, everybody has to always make references to the land deal, Otis, Miss Tessmacher,
Otisburg.
Yeah, it just became a staple. And but
like
then,
I love the legacy Easter eggs, but when they always like rely on direct pulls to influence like what's happening now, like that's it doesn't work in too many respects. I mean, it hardly worked. The land deal hardly worked with Kevin Spacey in Superman Returns. The only reason he was so good was because Kevin Spacey was so good in that role. But yeah, I mean that stuff, and the only time it worked post anything like that was the Scooby-Doo and Crypto 2.
yeah,
Like
that was awesome.
But when they do legacy polls and things like that, I mean, we've just read comics where we had like a Feora that was, or was it a direct pull of Ursa? It was one of them, but it looked just like her. It was. It's been a minute. It's been a minute. I couldn't tell you what issue it was.
Okay.
With all the jumping around we
have
been doing back in the Loeb era with the All In, and then.
Yep. Trust me, I know. I know. All right, more about the movie. Okay, one thing about this movie that's always boggled my mind, and I've never heard anyone really explain exactly how it happened or how it worked. We were always been told that they wrote Superman 1 and 2, and they were filming them back to back, and then of course had to stop, finish 1. And that's why technically the spinning the earth backwards, it was supposed to be the end of Superman 2, but it got put on the end of Superman 1. And it's just a jumbled mess. But my question has always been, Lois dying, where does that fall into the story? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Like, where does it fall into the story of if it was 1 and 2 together,
right?
And that was going to go back?
Because if we look at the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2, okay, the movie starts at a point and then it plays out the rest of what would have been Superman 1. And then the 2 officially starts. And you don't get the Lois death scene because you have to go back in time to pull that off. So my question has always been, where exactly did this death scene and idea and everything take place in the original stories?
Why did they ultimately decide to have her die and him turn back time on
right
at the end of part 1?
Yeah. So, and sadly, Tom Mankiewicz has passed. Donner has passed. Chris has passed. Margot has passed. Jean has passed.
Yeah.
Jackie Cooper has passed. The only one who's really still around's Mark McClure. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy,
I mean, that's what happens when a movie is pushing 50.
I know, and it doesn't. It gets referenced and brought up and used so much. But let's talk about our Daily Planet here. We got Margot Kidder as Lois Lane, and she works for the most part. She's not my favorite. I always felt like it was very much of that time of she loved Superman and didn't care really for Clark. She just kind of, he's Clark,
Right.
And I always felt bad for him, but I always loved Jackie Cooper as Perry White, though.
Right. I mean, you gotta see that that's a Lois coming out of the coming out through the 70s, out of the 60s and the 70s. I mean, women were only being able to have a career like hers at that time.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it was kind of a big deal for her to be like completely independent as
Independent.
a journalist, to be taken seriously. So, I mean, for her to, not take a second glance at somebody she's not supposed to be taking a second glance at, that's why he played it so far afield with his Clark Kent was, you're not even supposed to take a second glance at him. And that's exactly what she's doing,
Mhm.
So I mean, she's playing that part, and I feel like, I mean, no, she's not my favorite, and yeah, she was a little mean at the time, but I still feel like she did a great job, and I still feel like she is a strong Lois Lane, and she belongs among the top of them, of the portrayals of the character. And she did a great job in a time when she was given it,
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. It's just one of those things that when you look at things now, because I think when you start with Terry Hatcher and you move forward with analyzing Lois, there's a lot more similarities from her Lois forward.
Yeah, she definitely had more of an impact on us and in our age bracket, I mean, yeah, there were multiple movies with her, but the main one she was prominent in was one,
Mm-hmm.
and as they progressed, she actually got like less and less time in them. So, but she
Lois was
Terry
predominant in
Hatcher
one.
was Terry
And
Hatcher was like the mainstay. So many hours worth of content for her. That's the beauty of having a TV show as opposed to just a film. You've
we'll
got a
talk.
lot more. It's a character medium as opposed to a plot driven medium.
Mm-hmm.
You write differently. TV is character driven as opposed to films.
Exactly. Well put, my friend. Well put. That's why
Not
I keep you around.
entirely, but primarily.
That's why I keep you around. But no, it is because you have more real estate. It's like what I did there to develop characters in a TV show.
Good one.
Thank you. Thank you. It's all about the real estate deal. But what I was going to say is, I forgot. Anyways, we're talking about Mark. Let's start with Lois here. She's great in the first film. She's predominantly a big part of the second film of why he gives up, and I never really liked that in the second film. Okay, that he gives up his powers to be with her, but who she really loves is Superman, because she's infatuated with the persona of Superman, and he's not really per se the same dude, so it's just interesting. And then she doesn't really know who this person is without his powers, and he doesn't know who he is without his powers. And then we have Jimmy Olsen, who's in all the movies, Mark McClure, which was neat because I forgot that Mark McClure actually appears in Powerless in the pilot episode.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, cool, Mark. Hey, McClure, what's up? So that was neat. And then Gene Hackman, who Lex Luthor, one of the most famous Lex, because he really brought a different charisma to the character. And even what's interesting is you go back, and we talked about this a little bit, you go back and you look at Luthor, who was in the serial Superman vs. Atom Man, which is the first appearance of the character. he's more akin to the 80s than Gene Hackman was.
Interesting.
So,
yeah, I mean, there was, when it comes to Lex Luthor in the Reeve movies, I mean, the land deal, being like this primary thing constantly, and then the smartest criminal mind of our time, he there was only a couple of things that pointed to some like genuine like engineering and ingenuity when it came to it. Otherwise, it was just like a narcissistic tendency, Like otherwise it was just pure narcissism on his part. Like, I'm Lex Luthor and you just need to listen to me. You need to obey.
No, you're right.
But I mean, he he did a job.
He did. And Alora she's risen, everyone. She's here. The Kryptonian princess herself, Alora. We keep looking at Superman the film is great. There's definitely Chris plays such confidence of Superman and then such a awkwardness when it comes to Clark. And I really hate the argument at the whole big Quentin Tarantino thing. People talk about his big critique of Superman. I don't agree with. But anyways, let's move in. Anything else we want to say about Superman the movie per se, the first movie? And just for everyone to listen, surprise, we will be doing a free commentary on Superman the movie, the 3-hour TV cut this month on our Patreon. So stay tuned. So be prepared.
She muted my mic.
I know. That's what kids do, man. But anything else you can think of for Superman the movie before we move on?
No, I mean we can move on. We've talked about it before, and there's no denying, that it is a fantastic film, and the characters and the actors portraying him in the movie are iconic.
Superman 2. Same returning cast. This time, the big change is we have half a film directed by Richard Donner, half, pretty much directed by Richard Lester. That's why we have the two cuts of Superman 2 and Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut. And this one was always great. I always joked about, I've told you before, and I've said this before on the podcast. When I was a kid, I couldn't remember what was Superman 2 and what was Superman 1 because I had them taped off TV together. And of course, in Superman 1, we meet the 3 Kryptonian villains that play into the story of Superman 2. Some people argue that the Richard Donner cut really is not a full-fledged film. I get it, but personally, the Richard Lester, it's so weird because there are certain scenes I prefer in the Richard Donner cut compared to the Lester cut. I hate the kiss that wipes her memory. Like, where did we get that power?
Yeah, what kind of power is that? Seems very inappropriate. That people wish they could do something like that.
And there's always the Superman fights the bully kind of thing. That in the Richard Donner cut, I think, if I remember right, it's after he turns back time that he does that, which makes no sense. But
I mean, yeah. So he goes back to kind of get revenge on the trucker, and in my opinion, I feel like that's something that Superman would do. He does put bullies in their place.
Yeah.
People who are always picking on the weak and marginalized. He is a defender of those people. So, I mean, in my opinion, absolutely. That is a 100% Superman thing to do. But throwing Zod down a canyon with a smile is not quite the picturesque Superman that we know of, you know.
I agree. So Superman 2, I like, there's certain things I like better, like there's scenes, and we'll get into that a little bit more because we will be doing a commentary on the Richard Donner cut later in this year. Years ago, we did do a commentary. It should be on YouTube still, from Superman 2. Way back.
Way back.
But we never did a commentary on the Richard Donner cut. So that'll be coming. And we'll discuss a little bit more ins and outs during that film's discussion. But yeah, I like having both versions. I grew up with Superman 2, but there are definitely things in that film that are like, that's why it's very important the director that you get. What are their sensibilities? When do they know to be serious? When do they know to be humorous? What is funny? What is just, campy? It's very important. Very important.
Yeah, it's very important in the comic book genre. A medium in itself lends itself to a lot of campy ideas, and if they're not pulled off with grace, they can just be that very campy and like, DC, just from DC's library, Doom Patrol. I mean, if that wasn't done with the care and the love of the material that it was, like, that could have been a disaster.
Superman 2, like, there's the scene of Zod's insurrection, which we see him break a red crystal in the Richard Lester cut of Superman 2. And it's just interesting things like that. You're like, huh? What's going on here? But it is funny because people will ask, like, if it has Gene Hackman in it, okay? Then it was shot by Richard Donner. If it doesn't have Hackman in certain scenes, it's a Lester shot. That's one way to kind of tell some things. And it's like, cool. It's good to know. Something for Superman the movie, if someone doesn't know, is, I meant to say this, Jeff East played the young Clark Kent, but sadly, for some reason, all of his dialogue was cut, and Christopher Reeve redid all of the lines in kind of a lower voice or higher voice, to be more childlike. I did not know this till many years after, watching the film, that they did that to poor Mr. East.
I always thought it sounded like him. So when I got that, like, actually confirmed years ago, I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, but yeah, sadly, I wonder if the performance was that, or if they just wanted to have him sound more like Reeve.
Yep. So, all right, moving to Superman 3. Now, man, this is probably I think this is the most decisive film in the Superman canon.
Divisive.
I really do. Yeah. That's enough to say. Okay. Because there are some great parts in this movie. And I think Chris looks the best in this movie, and his acting is on point. I think this gives more power to Clark as a character and everything, with him returning to Smallville, because one of my favorite scenes in Superman 4, jumping ahead, is when we see him on the farm selling the farm. And it's right before the guy shows up and Clark puts the glasses back on and everything. And he comes out and he's a little not as goofy, and bumbly and everything. And Superman 3 has some great parts in it. But then it has parts where you're just like, this is like two movies trying to fight for what's the dominant film.
Yeah.
And what's funny is this movie, okay, as a child, where I spent most of my time growing up, let's see. Sorry, excuse me. We had two like mom and pop video stores.
Right.
But they were like mom and pop stores, but they were both out of the grocery store. So Farm Fresh was the grocery store, and you could rent movies there. Okay. And they always had the case for Superman 3, but the copy had been damaged. It had been melted or damaged. And they talked about, how the VHS tapes worked. And I didn't know at that time that you could reserve movies from the library. So then we eventually got a Blockbuster, and then it was called Movies. It was like Moovies, which was like a chain. Eventually they showed up, but it was right before we moved. So, and they were always busy. And I never really looked for Superman 3 there, because at that point I was so like into what was new. Like I remember one time Jurassic Park 2 was coming out. Okay. And I remember I asked my teacher if I could go to the bathroom. This is 97. And I went down to the payphone, called the video store, and asked them to hold a copy. And I picked it up. And then my dad, when he got home from work, I asked if we could go to the video store. We walked in and I was like, yeah, pick up for Patrick on the video. My dad kind of looked at me like, how did you pull this off?
That's hilarious.
So all that to say, and then it kind of just fell away, and I kind of just always forgot about it, because I was always like, oh yeah, I got to see that one. And then when Superman Returns came out and there was the big boom of being easily able to find the films, I've got to watch Superman 3, and it's my least viewed Superman film. I think I've seen it a total of 3 or 4 times.
Oh wow.
Because I just feel like there's something missing. There's something off about it, but there's some really great stuff in there. And that's the one I was rewatching for this podcast, and I didn't get to finish it because life happens. And because I don't know it as well, but
yeah, it's the one where they almost wanted to do a Brainiac thing, but then they kind of pulled back on it because it wasn't it certainly wasn't any alien. It was some Earth-based technology. So I mean, Superman 3. That was actually, I know you talked about Superman 4 being one of your favorites growing up because you were able to see it a lot.
Yep, it was always
for
on
whatever
TV.
reason, Superman 3 was always on when I was growing up. And it's funny because it was on either cable or just an antenna channel when it was like a movie on the weekend. It was a movie on a Saturday or a Sunday during the day when there was nothing else on. And my mom loved Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy and stuff growing up. So Richard Pryor was in that movie, so we were going to see it. And, so I saw it because I'm sure I saw it because my mom wanted to see it. And then anytime that it was on TV and we weren't doing anything on a Saturday or a Sunday, and we'd watch it. So I've seen it a few times, a handful of times in my life. And, I mean, like it's got a nostalgia bit for me, and it's most of the movie except for like the rich dude and those people, and then the robots in the end and stuff. But the rest of the movie is gold. I love the rest of the movie.
Uh-huh. And what's funny, just to clarify, James and I, when he says when I grew up, we grew up at the same time. Okay. Different areas, but
Yeah.
same time. We're 6 months apart. Okay. It's not like we're this large gap or anything. Okay.
Right.
But no, but like I just remember I felt like every time I visited my grandparents in Ohio.
I just have a feeling like, because knowing my mom and the movies and the way, the movies she let me watch growing up, and like watching Eddie Murphy and Richard Pryor in the 80s. I mean, you know what you're getting. Okay. So that's what that's how I grew up. I just know that yours was a little stricter in that sense, probably growing up. So
my mom
it is a little different.
My dad wasn't, and I got away with some stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, and we'll come back around. We'll come back around to this, but Superman 4. Okay. This was so funny because like this was the Salkinds had sold the rights to Canon. There's a great documentary on Canon called The Electric Boogaloo. And it was streaming on Amazon Prime. I'll check and see if it is still streaming. Hold on. Because it really helped show you what Canon had really done for films. Like, so it's so crazy. All right, but anyways, and Canon was very cheap in the way they made stuff, but they were profitable because their business model. It is currently not streaming anywhere. So yeah, Electric Boogaloo: The Wild Untold Story of Canon Films. I watched it years ago when it was on Netflix.
Oh, interesting. I mean, Canon Films was on like so many films you remember from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, Superman 4, Masters of the Universe, a lot of Chuck Norris. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. But they got the rights, and they were supposed to make this big Superman film, and they got Chris back because he was going to write the film, and he had a lot of input. And then Gene Hackman is back, Margot Kidder is back. I mean, everybody's back. The addition of John Cryer, all of this, and then they slash the budget, and then like they start doing all kinds of tinkering. Then they're like, oh, maybe we can make this into Superman 4 and 5. And it didn't really work. I mean, they changed the story. I mean, it became a disaster and a mess. And it's pretty sad what happened. Like this is the Superman film that Chris goes out on. And there's a lot of good in there. Like, I guess, one of the reasons as a child I loved this one, you had Lacey Warfield, who actually seemed to have a genuine interest in Clark, which I thought was kind of refreshing and nice. But he's fighting Nuclear Man. He's fighting another superpowered being who's not Kryptonian. And like I said, this one always seemed like it was on TV, on like WGN or whatever. So it was just really easily accessible. So I remember it a lot. And yeah, so what is it's got some cheap campy parts. It has some recycled footage that does not look great. But what are some of your feelings in Superman 4?
I mean, for you, 3 is the least watched Superman movie. For you, 4 is the least watched Superman movie for me.
See, guys, James and I don't agree on everything.
Right. I mean, if that's a complaint out there or something, but
it's happened.
You guys agree on everything. It's so boring. No. Yeah, no, that's the least watched of mine. Just really through access. When I bought the 4 movies on DVD years ago, that's when I got a chance to watch it a couple of more times. over a couple of years. And I've got the Blu-ray set that I got last year. So I am actually due for a Blu-ray rewatch of all of the Chris movies. So I'm going to go through those, and I'm going to have a more fresh watch of Quest for Peace. I didn't get that. That was what I was actually considering watching that before we got on today. But I had to watch the doc that came out in September. So that definitely took precedent over rewatching Quest for Peace.
Cool. That's
but
cool.
I'm looking forward to checking it out. I was really excited, back when during the Bendis run there, when we got a Nuclear Man cameo in a comic, but that's it. He's never come back. We've never seen him again. It was just an image. He's never had an actual storyline,
and that's sad. And then we got a Mr. Gorman reference in Superman and Lois. So that was pretty nice. But for the most part, I think it's funny because how you and I feel about these two. And my goal is this month, being March, to watch all 4 Chris movies. I might end up watching them out of order just because I'm, like I said, planning to watch the 3-hour cut with Brian. And it's just finding the time to do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna end up watching them 5. I'm gonna watch the Donner cut as well as the Lester cut.
See, I'm saving that one because that's one of our upcoming Patreon things, and I'm gonna watch the Lester cut so that when we're doing the Patreon, I'll be more fresh.
I want to have a fresh view of both of them. I've actually never seen the Donner cut. I never had that one before I got the Blu-ray set.
Nice.
So that's why I need to go through and watch them so I can watch that one as well, and then be a little more fresh on both films and see some of the differences.
So I'm going to share my screen real fast because I found a picture. That's that other McFarlane Superman that I was talking about. Just like, okay, it just kind of looks generic. It looks cool, but it's like, I like it. Like, I'll probably buy it because I have an addiction and a problem. But I'm like, I need more from my Superman toys. Okay, need more. So Superman 4 is the last one with Chris. There was a Superman 5 script, and we didn't do an episode on it because every other podcast did. But there was a live reading, like a stage production by some fans of the Superman 5 Superman Reborn script. Check that out online. All-Star Superfans talk about it. Anthony over at Digging for Kryptonite talks about it. And there's some others that were talking about it. And I was just like, you know what? We'll mention it, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. Excuse me. I'm getting over some health.
Maybe
stuff.
One day when we need to pull something out.
Bro, we have so much stuff. We will be here till we're dead. Okay. If we really tracked the stuff the way that
if this actually ends and we just keep doing Supernatural report,
I mean,
on the real, like
we'll just keep them together. Because I mean, like I've started mapping out like Krypton report. Like I mapped out this year's, last year, but I also mapped out 2026 for the most part. Sketched 2027 and 2028. So. Sketched them out. There's so much, and we'll get there. That's me and Brian's slogan. We'll get there.
Right.
Like there's Superman stuff I have on my shelf I have not watched yet. Like I'm making my way through all of the George Reeve series. They got me all the Adventures of Superman cartoons. I haven't started yet because that's all coming up. So there's still stuff to explore, and we haven't finished Superboy yet. So we will get there, but. Something unique happens. And this was brought to my attention by our friend Zach Moore, that we got what was called Superman Redeemed. It was a fan edit. And if you've not seen this, send me an email or a message, okay? But it's a fan edit of Superman 3, 4, with a little bit of the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. and it creates a new movie. And dude, it is good.
Yeah.
I mean, it is good. It is so good that
I think I've started that. I'm
I-
pretty sure I've started it.
I burned a disc, an actual DVD, and printed cover art, and I have it on my shelf next into all my DC films. It's that good that it really is almost like a new experience with Christopher Reeve in Superman films, Superman Redeemed. Like it is that good of a film. And I think it's still in my library on my like digital stuff that I can just pull up at any time. Because and I highly talk anyone, like I'm so blessed that like when I heard about Zach Moore had a copy of it and he sent me the link, and I, it's something I'm very glad that I have access to, because it is someone who meticulously was able to what do you call it, craft a film from other films, and I highly just, if you don't have it, or if you haven't seen it and want to, just message me. It's in my Dropbox. I'll send you a link. Okay. No biggie. Okay. That's all I'm gonna say, people.
Right.
But it was just a way of taking the best of the Christopher Reeve era and putting them into a film. Like, I know there's a fan edit of Superman Returns we'll talk about later on down the line. Excuse me. But yeah, Superman Redeemed. Good flick. So, but yeah, we have, this great and powerful, iconic Superman who Chris tragically suffered a horrible event. And then he would emerge later as Virgil Swan on Smallville, keeping that Superman kind of legacy alive, being connected. And then he was digitally resurrected in The Flash, which everyone felt weird about. And that's like, that whole scene in that movie to me feels like previs. Like, all right, this is what we're going to film, or this is what we're going to use, And I think, okay, if I wanted to actually have a scene with Christopher Reeve as Superman, I would either take a scene of him walking or something from an existing film, or if I needed better visuals, I would use his son Will and then deep fake Chris's face kind of over it, like the way they did the technology for Paul Walker in The Fast and the Furious, and just get a scene of him standing with his hands on his hips type thing. No dialogue or anything like that. If I needed better visual representation to capture, because it's just kind of boggling to us how that scene in The Flash is, where it's like you pointed out, at first it's the Henry Cavill like silhouette that we had seen, and then as the character comes down, it's Chris and then Helen Slater, Supergirl. And it's sad that the only time we see them two together is in this. Aaron Pierce, a great Superman fan and editor, look him up online. He's made a lot of, like, he's been editing over time, making Superman 4 much, much better. He did a scene where he used Superman, Clark, or Chris and Helen Slater, and made a scene of them two together, which is chef's kiss. So,
right.
It's kind of sad that that's kind of the last visualization that we get of Chris as Superman, and this legacy, this everybody looks back and references to. Now, we got recently the Superman 78 comics, which Wilfredo's art very much, of course it's supposed to be Chris, but he does it's Chris, but in not every detail, but it's him kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
it's less Chris than Gary Frank, but it's still recognizably Chris.
And what's crazy is Gary Frank was not trying to draw Chris, but pretty much drew Chris. And that's because, Gary Frank and Jeff Johns just really wanted to, what do you call it? Bring back that kind of imagery, that style. And we'll be talking Secret Origins a little bit later this year. So, but, he's had representation in the comic. And, and what's interesting, and this goes back to my statement, is you do something in the movies, that film impacted so much because at the time, Clark was not that way in the comics, at the time of when this film came out. And then, so
Yeah, he wasn't this bumbly, clumsy Clark Kent. He wasn't this shy and timid person. Clark Kent was still a large individual, and he kind of played on those strengths as well, as a journalist, with a little bit of force and intimidation when necessary. But so to be kind of that bumbling and clumsy, I mean, it has worked its way into many iterations of Superman where he uses his clumsiness to cover up saves and things like that,
Yep. Which I love. That was one thing Janine and I talked about on our discussion of All-Star that I loved. And my favorite part of that book is when Clark's like helping save people by being this bumbly doofus, because if he doesn't, people, won't see,
Yeah. Might just, he just stop somebody for a second just so they don't get a piece of falling debris to hit him in the head.
Yep.
So
it's pretty crazy.
The Superman 78 books are pretty good. They've been written very well. Vendetti's got he's got a pretty good knack for the voices of each character. I feel like they sound like they come from the Superman 78 universe of movies. So I would read more. I don't know if it's getting a third series after Metal Curtain.
I I would like one though. But
I do need to pick up the trades of each. Superman 78.
Yeah, I do too.
Metal Curtain.
I do too. I those are some trades I do want to get. Let's see. I'm just trying to think here. We've touched on a lot, I want to make sure we hit everything, but one thing of the biggest things about Superman 2 was, the different director and what that came to be. And I just, want people to understand how much of an impact that really, makes on everybody. So,
all right. So I watched Superman, the Christopher Reeve story today, and that it is a very good documentary. It is very well made, and it is an emotional roller coaster.
it is.
Like from beginning to end, it's got his tragedy, and the tragedy of his entire family. The impact on his entire family spread throughout, and then cutting back and forth to his time as coming up from Juilliard before he went into got the role of Superman, and then all of his roles in between. It's just, it is a very Jamie kept telling me she hated me while watching it because every time it cut back, she just started bawling. So at least she was happy I was crying too. But man, she just broke down every time.
I think one thing I really loved about that documentary was understanding how their family dynamic worked, but also shining a light on Dana for all that she did.
Yeah. Yeah. She spent a good part of nearly 10 years or so, 10, 11 years, taking care of him 24/7. Yeah. I had heard about the documentary and about how he had his older two children, and that it was briefly touched upon. I thought it was handled pretty well, I mean, because it was a story about his life. And I mean, as much as we want people to be as good as Superman, even the actors playing them aren't. I mean, except for maybe one, but I mean, that's
Debatable.
conjecture, right? That's all conjecture. But from word of mouth, there is one that is pretty close. But yeah, so just him, his life and his kids. Yeah, it was a beautifully made documentary, and it was so good just to see.
The scenes that got me is when you have Robin Williams and Chris together.
Yeah.
And then you get the line about, if Chris was still here, I think Robin would still be here.
Right.
And that really chokes me up right there.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid to admit it, dude. I'm a man. I'm not afraid to admit emotion. Stuff gets to me, and I've been extremely emotional the past.
It's okay to have empathy and feel pain for other people. It's all right.
I know. I've been extremely emotional over the past week since the whole health thing, but
right.
It's just, it was a very good documentary, and it was very well done. And I enjoy a good documentary. The older I get, I enjoy a good documentary. So
absolutely.
But okay, so I want to give a plug. I need to advertise this more. But if you say you're listening to this and you're like, I'm a Superman fan, how can I do something cool for Superman? I want you to go check out the Siegel and Schuster website. The Siegel and Schuster Society is based out of Cleveland, Ohio, and they are raising money to build a memorial park. And all the details are on the website. You can donate little by little or whatever. I just redonated because every year when I renew my Superman license plates, the additional cost for those plates goes to the Siegel and Schuster Society to help with building the statue and the park. So please check that out. Donate. Every little bit helps. It's their Let's Bring Superman Home project. And this is why, going back to the beginning, if you were going to change the location of Smallville for your film, okay, it had always been like in the Midwest. Sometimes it was in like upstate New York or whatever. And you're like, I'm going to put it in Kansas. No, you should have put Smallville in Ohio to honor Jerry and Joe. That's all I'm going to say.
Rural Ohio. Absolutely. I live a stone's throw away from all cornfields and everything. And,
bro,
and
you've been to my house. I walked down the street.
Yeah. Between me and Columbus is mostly cornfields, and then between Columbus and you, it's all cornfields. So
all I'm saying, man, like if you were going to say, hey, I'm changing up, that's what it should have been. But I think that no matter where Superman goes, Chris will be attached to it and forever remembered as Superman.
Yeah. And I mean, as it is, a lot of actors, they love their art, and they will take it to a point where, sequels, or they feel like it's some content is beneath them, this or that. So to spread your wing as an actor, I mean, of course you want to portray and do more difficult and that challenge you. And so I especially with the documentary, they talk about the struggles he had playing the character, how it kind of how it took over his image, the character took image, as opposed to kind of the other way around.
Mhm.
And but when it came down to it later on in life, after the accident happened and everything, all the stuff he was able to do and the foundation that he was able to establish, that's probably the closest thing to Superman that he's ever done, was being able to advocate for such a vulnerable and marginalized group of people.
Amen. Amen. Well, that's all I got. I'm kind of losing my voice. I'm really thirsty, and the only other thing I did find a news thing real quick. I know we're all over the place, but sometimes this happens. It was a quote from Vanity Fair saying, "Lanterns isn't part of the DCU's larger storytelling plan, but could become a multi-season show," says showrunner Chris Mundy. And all I can say is, what?
Yeah, that's annoying.
That's all I can say. And that's all I'm going to say for right now is, what?
Yeah, that's just on the face of it. We'll leave it at the face. That's just annoying.
To throw back to that video from, earlier in the decade, ain't got nobody got time for that.
Right.
Actually, last decade. But all right. Well, guys, this is Tyler, the Superman, Man of Tomorrow, Superman Blue. And this is James, Superman Red, the Man of Steel, pumping iron in his spare time in his garage. And we say, remember,
Look up in the sky!
thank you for checking out the Krypton Report. Please click our link tree in the show notes to follow us on your favorite social media platform. We have a $1 Patreon, just $1 a month to keep us going. And in return, you get exclusive shows and specials. If you want to join us on an episode, send us an email or a message.
I am Brian Peters, the creator and host of Gravely Amusing. For the past 30 years, I've studied the history of gods and monsters in pop culture and our world. As a student of theology and history, I've tried to understand evil and its impact on us. As a writer, I've tried to share this knowledge. As a comedian, I've tried to make people laugh as I do it. But as a man-child, I'm still that scared 7-year-old boy. Join me as I share the history of horror and sci-fi, discuss classic and modern pop culture, and share a creepy story or two. This podcast may scare you, it may horrify you, or it may leave you gravely amused. Listen to Gravely Amusing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever podcasts are found. Follow us on Twitter at gravely_amusing or on TikTok at gravely amusing.
Look up in the sky!